Best practices for attracting top sales talent. Next on the RecTech podcast.
Welcome to RecTech, the recruiting technology show, where we highlight interesting HR and recruitment technologies, as well as talking with recruiters on how they use it to recruit and manage their talent. Today's show will be a recruiter edition. I'm your host, Chris Russell. I consult with HR tech vendors on marketing strategy and product development at rectechmedia.com. Let me first give a shout out to our sponsor for the show, Beyond.com, and their popular text-to-hire text messaging service. Text-to-hire is a text recruitment solution that gives you instant mobile access to the candidates you want to reach for high-quality one-on-one conversations. We're all on our phones constantly, so if you have that one tough position you need to fill or just want to break through the clutter and connect with candidates in a very unique way, why not reach them on a device that's already right in their hands? Right now, Beyond is offering our listeners 10% off your first text-to-hire campaign. Just go to beyond.com/rectech, that's RECTECH, to learn more and find out how many people you can reach. All right, so one of the latest clients at RecTech Media is John Hoskins of Sales Genomics. John has had a long career in the sales industry. I've known him for a couple of years now. First with Xerox Learning Systems, where he rose from account manager to regional sales manager, general sales manager, and ultimately director of U.S. sales operations. Since then, he has held other high-profile positions in sales leadership at various firms, and today he is co-founder of Sales Genomics, specializing in sales talent assessment. He's recently written a white paper on attracting sales talent called 7 Habits of Highly Effective Sales Recruiters. And I thought it would make a great conversation for the show today. So here he is from Phoenix, Arizona. John, how are you doing today?
Good, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, glad to have you. I think it's a good topic to take on since good salespeople are hard to find, right?
That would be an understatement. I think the LinkedIn talent survey showed that sales talent would be the number one sought after recruit this year. That's not unusual. It's usually easily in the top 5. And the clients and prospects that I speak to every day and our folks talk to every day tell us, we ask the question, do you want quality or quantity candidates? And they say, hey, both. We can't find either one. So it's tough.
Yep. It's always been a very hard-to-fill position out there. So first, John, introduce us to Sales Genomics. What do you guys do and how did it all start?
Well, sure. It started inspired by my failure in retirement. I had a sales training firm that I sold in 2006 to a Swedish consultancy. And I was only 55. I was bored with not doing anything, so got my mind active again. And I didn't really want to go back into the sales training industry right away. I wanted to try to dive deeply into one facet of sales productivity. Mm-hmm. And I thought about my own experience of being a frontline sales leader. And I said, the one common denominator of successful sales leaders is that they know how to recruit good people. So I got involved with a company out of Dayton, Ohio called the HR Challey Group. Many people may be familiar with that brand and name, now called Growth Play. And we founded Sales Genomics as a sales selection tool. And I encouraged 2 other people to invest with me. And we are up and running and working very well. Yeah. A lot of nice clients and helping a lot of people.
So how does it typically work with the assessment part of it? What does the employer do when they come to Sales Genomics?
Well, it generally starts with an assessment of their incumbents and taking a look at what the difference is between top performers and bottom performers. We actually kind of study failure to understand success. So when you stack rank your top performers to bottom, a lot of assessment organizations will just want to look at the top. We want to see the difference between what the top performers possess that the bottom performers don't. And those are sort of the DNA markers that we use to scale the hiring. It's an online assessment through job analysis and the process I just mentioned. We choose a profile that has competencies that we can say are predictive of success in that type of sales job.
Well, let's get onto the white paper. It's called 7 Habits of Highly Effective Sales Recruiters, and we'll tell you where to get it once the show ends here, John. But let's start by, what are the common pitfalls that sales organizations make when it comes to recruiting sales talent, in your opinion?
Well, actually, 7 is the number. I can kind of itemize them here. I'd say the big pitfall, often it's kind of a true-false question, is does the team that gets and nurtures the most A players win? And certainly when we ask sales leaders that question, they advocate, yes, that's true. If I find more A players, I'm going to win. Our point of view on that is that even today, somewhere in the area of 50% of most sales people do not make their quota. And if you look at the 15 million sales-related jobs in the U.S., on average, about 26% turnover across all industry segments. So that's a 26% error rate, and we all know what the cost of a bad hire is. So our point of view, while we won't differ with the experience of someone saying yes, A players, we don't know that you can find that many superstars. But we do know that you can scale to find, solid performers. Mm-hmm. And most of all, we know that you can use our tool to avoid those costly, unforced hiring errors. And they say today it's equal to at least 1 times an annual salary every time that you make a mistake. That doesn't include any lost opportunity time or damaged client relationships, et cetera.
So how important is, one of your habits is always be recruiting, as it says. Definitely a great phrase. How important is engaging the frontline sales hiring manager in the process? And there are certain things there you can do to help, right?
It's huge. At Xerox, we had a standard that as a frontline sales manager you had to meet around recruiting. And it had to do with the whole idea of always being recruiting. I mean, when you're a salesperson, one of the things you always do is prospect because you just never know when you're going to need that new business. And to make your numbers, you probably need that new business. And it's true as a sales leader as well. Turnover often occurs when you least expect it. Even, if you feel like you have a good handle on it, something happens. People fall off the edge of the planet and they go to another competitor, they make a life change, what have you. So we really believe that the always be recruiting thing means that you as a sales leader have to always be thinking, even if you're full complement, and you're not hiring. One of the things we often hear, talking about, we're not hiring right now. So it's like, yeah, but you should be recruiting because the good players don't just walk by your door when you're looking. The good players are out there all the time, and you have to build a bench strength of candidates. One of the standards we had in our quarterly business review as leaders is we'd have to come in and senior leadership and say, okay, give me the names of all the people on your team, and I want to see 2 names behind each person that you're currently talking to that you would call to recruit if that person turned over tomorrow, and you couldn't duplicate names. So it meant you had to really be out there all the time. I mean, standing in a hotel lobby and you see a salesperson interacting cordially with a service person, you think, that looks like a really good salesperson. You give them your card and you say, look, if you're ever looking to think of changing jobs, give me a call. I'd like to talk to you. And that's just what it takes. Always be recruiting, just like always be closing.
Absolutely. John, when you were recruiting for your companies, what methods did you find to be sort of the best source of finding those candidates out there? Was it referrals or?
Well, certainly referrals. We had a very strong refer an employee program with a nice bonus for anyone that made that referral. Of I think my last firm at Advantage Performance Group, we had $2,500 to anyone who gave us a name where we hired that person and they stayed for a year. And that became a great source of candidates for any company. Mm-hmm. But the answer really is all of the above. First of all, you have to engage that frontline sales leader. You have to get them looking. You have to engage all the employees. You got to get them looking. I hesitate to say you don't want to just rely on internal recruiters. I know some organizations from a budget constraint point of view will say, well, we don't work with external recruiters. I don't think that's smart. When we were at Xerox, we did both. We had our HR group and we also had external recruiters that we worked with, who, by the way, have a Rolodex that often is much deeper and much broader than what your HR department might have in a specific niche. So it's all of the above. You have to source everywhere and in very creative ways. Even going to customers. I used to go to call up good customers. I'd say, hey, look, you have people in our industry calling on you all the time. Tell me who calls on you that you're really impressed with. And I'd get that number and I'd find that person.
Yep. One of the things in your white paper that I liked was the the fact that you should think of your recruiting as a sales talent pipeline, just like you do your regular sales prospects. So talk about that a bit in terms of how often you should review that sales talent pipeline with your manager and measure that progress.
I'd say at least quarterly, and we were big on replacement planning at Xerox as well. So not only were you engaged with the individual about their career aspirations and from your point of view, reporting to management what you thought the opportunity was, we kind of had a 5-point scale. And I remember that the third level was happy for now, likes the lifestyle, at least will be in the job for a couple of years. Then 4 was ready for the next step. And that meant that this is a hypo and probably someone that could move into sales management, and you started nurturing and developing them right away. And then 5th was ready for skip level. In other words, you had somebody and you said, wow, this person could probably do my job or somebody else's. They're ready for a move. The thing is, if you don't manage that expectation one way or the other, they're going to go find that opportunity elsewhere. And so I found that to be very important. Just even monthly, I would try to have a conversation, not a full-fledged career conversation, but let your hair down, have a cup of coffee or go out to dinner and break some bread. And how's it going? How's it feeling? Because engagement and retention will be key this year, because you think about all the people out there that are looking for salespeople. Where are they going to find them? Well, they're going to find them in your organization. And I know examples of salespeople who said, last time I talked to my sales manager about my career was, I can't remember. But in the meantime, they've been having dinner with the VP of sales at a major competitor twice a month. So it's something you just have to be focused on all the time.
Yeah, you call it just in case, and I think it's a very good point. Not enough companies have that backup plan. So having a list of backup candidates, I think, is a great tip there. So appreciate that. John, what other aspects of recruiting salespeople are best practices? Like asking for W-2s is still a good idea. How much do you get into how much of getting into the numbers with these candidates is still important? So, I mean, we look at the best practices and kind of divide it into maybe 25, 25, 25, 25 in terms of your decision-making process. So we would advocate no assessment is 100% accurate. Anybody that tells you they have one is either not smart or they're lying, one or the other. And you rely on the assessment results for about 25% of your decision overall. It's a non-subjective way, a scientific way of understanding the makeup of that individual and their potential. 25%, we believe, is your behavioral interviewing and how that's structured. And it was interesting, Chris, I read an article not long ago out of the UK where they said that if you have 9 or more people interact with that person during the hiring process, you increase the odds of them being a good hire exponentially. And I've always thought about serial interviewing. I mean, you have maybe 4 or 5 or 6, but 9 seemed to like a lot. And it also seemed like, well, I wonder if the person would tolerate. But the fact is, if you're making a better decision, what does it cost to just have one more person see that individual? So the behavioral interviewing, and we provide people behavior interviewing skills as well as evaluation guides when they're doing it. We don't want to have the same interview 6 times. We want to have 6 different interviews exploring competencies that are related to success in that job. And we find that a lot of managers, because they don't interview very often, are rusty. And so it's important to hone their skills. And then a third, another 25% would be background check and reference check. Mm-hmm. It gets harder and harder these days to do those things because of the legal requirements. I always relied on my HR group to do those. I do know that many of our clients do want to find W-2s because that's going to validate the person's salary requests and their requirements. And then the fourth category, 25%, is kind of more important today, it seems, than ever, which is cultural fit. Are they aligned with the values and the culture and style of the organization? A lot of times people are recruiting top performers from one company to another, and they say, well, if we bring John over from A company to B company, he'll perform just as well. But if John's going into B company that has a different culture than he had at A, it's very likely he won't do well. That culture will affect his performance. So we see that as a big, big thing to evaluate as well. I remember in one of my recruiting roles, the CEO was adamant about not seeing candidates that had, he'd want candidates that had a big ego, right? How much of that did you look for at times with candidates, and how big of a factor was that in your decisions?
There's a lot of myths in hiring salespeople. Another one, Chris, you've probably heard a lot of it, is we only hire athletes. Well, yeah. There's no evidence to suggest that, frankly, education background, athletic prowess, ego, any other number of kinds of characteristics or traits like that are more personality related have anything to do with sales success. Sales is a profession, and like any profession, it specializes. And so when we look at a sales role, there are many, many different types of salespeople out there and many different sales roles, and you have to match the skill sets and the competencies to that type of role. And the reason salespeople fail, most of them fail not because they're bad people or bad salespeople, but they're in the wrong kind of sales job for them. So we really try to make sure we're fitting that candidate to the job itself. And a big part of that is defining what good looks like in the role and understanding through job analysis, what does it take to be a top performer in that role? And then you just match them up. Yeah.
Gotcha. When it comes to the resume, John, you talk about getting more scientific with the data there, but just briefly touch on how to look at a resume for a sales candidate.
Well, this is data from HireRight, a firm that specializes in employee background checks. They suggest that 80% of all resumes are misleading. 29% have fraudulent degrees, 30% show altered employment dates, 40% have inflated salary claims, 30% have inaccurate job descriptions, and 27% give falsified references. So a resume is a piece of paper or a LinkedIn profile. Now, I do think that the half-truths that are on the paper-based ones might be mitigated someplace in some ways by LinkedIn, because you're out there in the public and social media, people can call you out on stuff. So I'm not dissing resumes overall. You certainly have to get them, but I don't think it's a way to make a decision. You can certainly have it as a knockout factor.
Yeah. Speaking of social media, John, is that part of a good salesperson's sort of skill set now, is just having maybe a presence on social media and just maybe having a good amount of followers? Do you think that's an important trait down to have for today's salespeople?
I do. And to me, it's about thought leadership and providing additional value to a customer and building a network. And we all know that great salespeople who are able to develop new business are great networkers. And there's never been better tools available to a salesperson for networking. I mean, when I started in sales, a prospect was a 3x5 card with a name of a company and a phone number. And you didn't have any idea who anybody was in that organization. You really had to be a detective to find out anything about people. Well, now with LinkedIn and social media, I mean, you can find out a ton about people before you call on them. So yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn is something that I think any good salesperson should be using. I use it every day. It has provided me great benefit and leads. And I actually find it educational too, reading other people's posts.
Yeah. These are the Glengarry leads.
Yes.
All right.
Second prize, set of steak knives.
Exactly. All right, John, just a couple more questions. Give me a couple of stories about your recruiting days, about a salesperson that stood out or someone you recruited in a creative way. What comes to mind?
Boy, there's so many. One of the benefits we had as a recruiting brand at Xerox, without a doubt. When I left Xerox, I went to a firm called Omega. We were a bank training consulting firm. Now, we had a very good brand within the banking industry, but nobody knew who Omega was outside of that industry. And then when I started my own firm, Advantage, and then I realized that we had no brand at all, it's just recruiting brand is right at the top of the list of things that you need. We did use external recruiters, internal recruiters. We advertised back then in newspapers. There were no social media or job boards per se. They just were starting up. But the brand got us unsolicited resumes from candidates saying, hey, I've heard about Xerox and I want to go to work for us. So I typically had 2 or 3 letters a week from people who wanted to interview with us. Getting creative in that situation is different than getting creative when you're Advantage Performance Group. And I do have a story of a guy that actually one of my colleagues one time picked one of the top performers in our organization out, literally from standing in a car rental line. He was standing in a car rental line. He saw this guy. He started interacting with them, gave him his card, and lo and behold, the guy came on board and, turned out to be one of the top performers. So it's just airplanes, trains, wherever you are, you can kind of tell how people interact with others in service situations, whether they have some of the characteristics and traits you might look for, the skill sets. And you just always putting that card out there and saying, hey, if you'd like to talk about a job, give me a call.
Standing in line, that's a pretty good one. That's as we head into 2017, John, it's a tight market. What are your predictions for this year when it comes to sales recruiting?
Well, I may have referred to it earlier. It's just a small pool. And that means your people are going to be getting called if you're a sales leader. So you be aware of that. And know that the people you're calling are going to be getting more calls. And so it's just, I think it's going to raise the bar. I think that sales recruiters are going to have to really double down on sourcing. They're going to have to get totally creative as to where they find opportunities. And there's going to be a ton of competition for them. We've done 2 projects recently helping organizations start up sales organizations from scratch. Mm-hmm. And of course, they work with an RPO to get the candidates, but we're involved in the assessment and selection process. And in some of these situations, they're hiring 200 people in 3 months, and the sales leadership as well. Yeah, it's a big ramp up, but the amount of effort that it takes them to source these people and initially screen them and then get them ready for that hiring manager interview, they'll tell you themselves it isn't what it used to be. It's just, although there's a lot of people out of work, supposedly, there's not a lot of salespeople out of work, and they're hard to find. I think also people may have to start to build their own and have a farm club. I mean, we did that at Xerox. We had entry-level positions where we brought people in and grew our own. And I actually just the other day, I had a couple clients say, we're going to start a college recruiting program again.
Well, John, that's great advice. Appreciate the information. And like you said, ABR, always be recruiting. So, John, thanks very much for joining me today.
Oh, you're welcome, Chris. Thanks for inviting me, and we'll get that white paper out to anybody that requests it for you.
Yep, the website is salesgenomics.com. That's genomix.com. For the link to the white paper, just click on rectechmedia.com or go to their landing page. It's salesgenomics.ontra, pages.com. That will do for this edition of the RecTech podcast. Thanks again to our sponsor. Remember to check out beyond.com/RecTech for that special 10% offer to their text-to-hire service. Follow me on Twitter at Chris Russell or visit rectechmedia.com. You can find the audio and links for this show on our blog, iTunes and Google Play, also out there, SoundCloud. Thanks for listening, everyone.